Today, we are talking about the temple principle. And so I want to get into exactly what this is and talk to community builders about how they should be thinking about this principle and applying it to their own communities. Let's start with an actual quote from your book. You say a temple is simply a place where people with shared values enact their community's rituals. The temple represents the community's strength and legitimacy. It's a sacred space, a place set aside for a particular use. And so I think a lot of people, when they think of temples, it conjures up an image. It conjures up an image of maybe a religious or a spiritual place. We maybe think of, for example, churches or mosques or other places like that. But you're not just talking about spaces like that, are you?
I'm not. And the book was informed or is informed by my own study of spiritual traditions that have been bringing people together for well over 1,000 years around shared values and purpose. And that's one of the reasons I use that term. And when we look at spiritual traditions that have continued to bring people together in powerful ways and making them more resilient, surprise, surprise, they're always temples. And so I wanted to share this idea that no matter who we're bringing together, it can be important. It certainly can augment our efforts if there's a special place where we come together. And we talk about rituals elsewhere in the book, this idea that we want to do things together that have meaning, that are not just practical. And often these rituals help us recognize, acknowledge how we're all changing. And so to have a special place you can do that matters, makes a difference. And, in the book, I talk about it doesn't need to be a permanent place, a permanent building that's only what you do there. A lot of people have beaches they like to return to as a family or as a sports team, and they have rituals they do on the beach. Be they fun rituals or meal rituals. And then someone's backyard can be a place where we gather regularly and know whenever we gather, we're going to find people in our community and we're going to be safe. But if we have no space, if we never make a space that's safe, that's special, that we do things that have meaning, then there's definitely something that we could invest in to improve how we're bringing people together.
And you talk about in the book how these spaces can, in fact, be temporary, that you can use, it doesn't have to be something that is set aside and it's a permanent structure and that's what it's always used for. I mean, it could be something like, for example, a banquet hall that is transformed for a particular ritual or some other space like that, right?
Well, it could be a banquet hall and it could be a backyard. And in my house, we use my living room. We have very special rituals that we use for my son's birthday. That, as far as I know, only our family does it for a special reason, because it's special to our family. And we make that space special for his birthday ritual every year. And there's a number of things we can do to make any place special. The first one is we just make sure there's a clear boundary that people have to cross over to walk in. So, for example, I got married very close to the beach in Hawaii. And there are a lot of people like to go to beaches. And I don't know if any given beach is special for a wedding to everybody. But one of the things we did is we put a ring of flowers around the ceremony space. So when our guests arrived, at some point they had to physically cross over a boundary, in this case of flowers, to enter the sacred space, the space that I would get married in. And of course, when my wife and our families showed up in procession, we too crossed this boundary, a very specific line that demarked when we were entering into the sacred space. A door totally counts. As you said, you could use a banquet hall. You can set up that door in such a way where guests understand when they show up and they enter that room, we're going to do things in this room that are special. Maybe someone's getting married. Maybe someone's getting honored. Maybe there are credentials that are going to be handed out. But the point is that space is going to be special while we're using it.
It's interesting to hear you bring that up. When I was younger, I used to take Hapkido, a martial art, and we were just practicing in a room at the university gym. And my instructor was not a lot for sort of the ceremonies and the pomp and circumstance, but one thing he always insisted on was that when you entered the door to practice, you bowed to the room. And he said, I want you to mentally take everything else you've got going on in your life and just leave it at the door and walk in and be here. And then again, bow to the room when you leave and you can pick it all up. I think what he was doing in that was acknowledging that boundary that you're talking about, saying, hey, there is a boundary here and I am crossing over it at this moment.
Yeah, when you walked through there, you did something that was symbolic, right? Because it wasn't practical, that that let you know and let others know that you're entering a space that was set aside to do something special, or said differently, what you would do in that room and the rules about what you would do in that room were different in that room than they were outside that room. So we could say that a different way. The things that were okay to do and say outside that Hapkido training space were different than the things you were supposed to be doing in that room. Am I right about that?
Yeah, if I just walked up to random strangers and did to them, the things that I'm doing to
Mm-hmm.
my fellow students in the Hapkido class, it would be frowned upon. They would not like it if I
Well, and
started
there were
tossing people
conversations you
around.
could have over dinner, right?
Hmm.
With maybe beers that would be totally okay at dinner with beers, and you better not have those conversations in Hapkido class.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned the backyard. I mean, it's interesting to hear you say that as well, because last summer we had a baby shower because my daughter-in-law had a daughter, and we welcomed that with a baby shower, and it was the same kind of thing. We transformed that backyard, which normally just is a backyard, into a space. The boundary in that case was already there; it was just a fence.
Mm-hmm.
But you actually talk about in the book some of the other aspects of a temple. And so I want to go through them, and because I recognize many of these just from the way that we transformed our backyard into that baby shower. The next one you mentioned is an invitation. We've talked a little bit about invitations in the past. How does that principle apply when it comes to temples?
Yeah, well, if I want to make a space special, be that for a group of volunteers or people celebrating a baptism for a family member, one of the things that makes a space special is who shows up. So if you can imagine that baptism and Bishop Tutu shows up, my guess is that space would feel more special. Am I right about that?
Absolutely. He didn't,
Right.
by the way. But
He
yes.
didn't show up, right? So one of the things we can think about when we're creating a sacred space is who are we inviting and who will make it special? And let's not overthink it. If it's for a daughter that's getting baptized, then invite family members and people important to your daughter, and not just put a poster out in your neighborhood that says, hey, we're going to have cake. Please come if you like cake. So who we invite to put in the space matters in making it special. And it could be you don't need to do very much else. If the people that are important to you show up, that space may become very special. I mean, we can do other things, but notice that alone, might do it.